First tonight, the looming shadow of another global financial crisis. Most people have probably bumped up against the limit of their credit card. But when your credit limit is $14 trillion, maxing out your debt could trigger a worldwide economic disaster. The US crisis has led to a new post-float high for the Australian dollar, and that's keeping many here awake at night. Earlier, I spoke to Bevan Sturgess-Smith, who's a stockbroker at Macquarie. Bevan Sturgess-Smith, welcome to 7:30.
Thank you.
And just how critical is this situation in the United States?
Oh, super critical. While it may not appear obvious to the average man in the street and affecting their own lives, but globally it's really significant. You've got the US, which has always been regarded probably as the world's largest and strongest economy, and it's having problems. If it's not able to solve this issue that's going on at the moment, they're not allowed to spend money. It creates all sorts of problems for them internally and externally. So it's very significant.
And you'd think that they'd come to some form of political solution, before this end date. Nevertheless, won't these problems continue regardless of, if one party falls into line behind another?
Well, that's right. With the amount of debt that we're talking about, and no matter what they might agree about stopping spending or reducing spending, given the amounts that we're talking about, it's going to take a long, long time for that budget to ever balance, if you like, or even to go back into credit.
So why is the US still in this type of strife? Is this just a hangover from the huge, global financial crisis that, was born in the United States?
Well, I think so, because the government there did bail out a number of institutions, spent a lot of money doing that, but also you've also got, over the last few years, or probably 10, 15 years, the US has spent a lot of money fighting wars in other parts of the world. That's a very expensive thing to do.
Now, how has the market reacted? Is it showing any confidence that despite what happens next week, that the US is, sound financially?
Oh, look, it's a really strange situation on our market. It's predicated by people being very concerned that the overall sentiment or perception is negative. But then for the last 2 weeks, we've been getting profit reports out of the US, and 73% of the companies that have reported have beaten expectations.
Now, the dollar is, the Aussie dollar is so high, and obviously that will get higher if the US continues to be in this strife. What does that mean for Australian companies here, particularly in Western Australia?
Well, when you think about how the dollar moves in Western Australia, you're mainly talking about exporters, people who send their goods and services overseas, and particularly those, the commodity or product that they're producing, they get paid in US dollars. And the obvious ones are the mining stocks, oil, gas, those sorts of things. Most of those commodities are paid in US dollars. So if those US dollars are worth less compared to the Australian dollar, you're actually getting less and less for the good that you're producing. But of course, if you're producing it in Australia, you're paying your costs in Australian dollars, and unfortunately at the moment the costs of production for most mineral and energy projects are going up. So the margin that you're making on those projects is going down, and so some of those projects may become marginal, and whether they'll continue or not, we'll just have to wait and see.
Right, and what about for the average, West Australian looking at this thinking, $14 trillion have made, debt. It's sort of beyond our expectations or our knowledge. But will we struggle if they struggle?
For the average person in the street in Perth, there's a couple of things. Obviously, if you're buying things online from the US, it's great because they're a lot cheaper, or if you're travelling there, it's a lot cheaper. But if you're working, for instance, for a mining company who's looking at starting a project to drill for something or produce something that's denominated in US dollars, that project will start being considered of maybe not going ahead, and that means your job could be at risk. Look, I don't want to be alarmist, we're a long way from that, but they're the sorts of things that could occur.
And what about your savings? What about people who are investing in the stock market? Well,
that's the tough thing at the moment, and we're seeing the market generally very negative at the moment. Each day for the last probably week it's been negative. You're seeing people's investments going down, and that's more a sentiment thing, because I think you'll find in Australia, again, we've got our profit reporting season in a couple of weeks. Most of our companies will still be making profit.
So just finally, do you think this is going to be resolved in the US?
I think it will. The US are very proud people. They like to think of themselves as world leaders and one of the strongest economies in the world. I just can't think that they'll allow this situation where they can be looked at from outside any differently.
If not, a catastrophe?
I'm not sure it'll be a catastrophe. Come Wednesday, I don't think the world's going to end. But for a lot of Americans, perhaps working for the US government that don't get paid, that'll be a very big issue. But I don't think that would last very long. They'll come to some resolution somehow, sometime.
Okay, Bevan, thanks for your time.
Thank you.